everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today we're going to be taking a look at my team selection ahead of double game week 28, but also what's hopefully going to be helpful for all of you is the chip strategy I'm looking at employing over the next few game weeks. I'm very much between two chip strategies. One would be to free hit in game week 29, and the other one would be to run through game week 29 and wildcard out of it. As you can see on screen, 83 points in game week 27 was decent enough. It was enough for a small green arrow. All but two of my players returned. That was Ake and Solanke. And my transfers did pay off this week. So Gabriel in for the hit for Estupinian. Estupinian, despite starting, got 0 points again. So the double Arsenal defence luckily did pay off for me this week. And Son was my other transfer in for Hwang Hee-chan. So 7 points from him. Luckily, we got the goal at the end. But to be honest, he was fantastic. So I would have felt pretty aggrieved if he didn't get anything from that match, because I think he hit the post, he had a penalty shout and a couple of assists that could have easily given him a pretty big haul. Overall though, not complaining, very happy with the team performance. I just wish that I had 1 week that was stand out at the moment, and that was a real blockbuster week and would halve my rank. So hopefully that's on the horizon, and week on week, as long as I'm getting green arrows, that's fine by me. So let's get stuck into the nitty gritty, and I'm going to start off with the transfer targets for game week 28. Now, top of the list for me are the two Luton assets who I don't already own, Alfie Doughty and Carlton Morris. Now, Alfie Doughty is probably going to be the easiest for me to get to personally because I've got Nathan Ake, and with Liverpool up next, followed by the blank and then Arsenal at home in game week 30, I think there's not really a chip strategy out there that would lead me to holding on to Ake for the next few weeks. Now, Doughty's just one option. I could also be looking at a Bournemouth defender. But if I'm going to try and avoid the free hit in game week 29, having Doughty in situ will be really important because he plays in game week 29 as well. Now, also with Doughty in mind, even if I wasn't looking at free hitting in game week 29, I just fundamentally think that he is the higher upside pick against the Bournemouth defenders at the moment. Yes, Bournemouth have a much better chance of keeping a clean sheet across the double, but at the end of the day, there are very few of them left now that have any attacking upside. And Zabani would probably be my preferred option in the Bournemouth defence. And he's got, I think, a 0.04 XGI per 90. Who knows? We might get lucky and he might get something from a corner. But generally speaking, he carries very little attacking upside. And I quite like the attacking upside that Doughty provides. And I think that can hopefully pay dividends, not just in game week 28, but also in game week 29 as well to avoid the free hit. So with those factors in combination, he would be my number one transfer target. Carlton Morris in second, also really like the look of him for the double, and then also obviously plays in game week 29. He is a little bit more difficult to get to because most of us will be looking at a front three of Solanke, Watkins and Haaland. Carlton Morris could be a play to bring in for one of them, but none of them are obvious transfers out this week as it stands. So I'll come on to my potential transfer routes, one of which is involving bringing in Carlton Morris. So I'll discuss that in just a moment's time. But you have to be quite smart about the way you position those transfers to make it actually make any sense. Moving on, Jarrod Bowen is the first and number one player I would be bringing in who didn't have a double this game week. Burnley at home is a very good fixture nonetheless. And then obviously, again, he plays in game week 29. So a lot of these transfers, as you can see, would be for players that have a game in game week 29 and therefore would help me to avoid the free hit. Even one injury to my starting 11 in game week 29, or not even 11 at the moment, would probably send me down the rabbit hole of avoiding this strategy and going for the free hit in game week 29 because fundamentally there are just too many players to try and get to with just 1 week remaining. Norberto Neto, also a decent option for double game week 28. Obviously, decent chances of clean sheets in at least one of the two matches. Sheffield United look very blunt up front at the moment. But I think unless you're happy to bring him in as a second keeper, and therefore you've still got one playing keeper that's ready to play in game week 29, he's a bit more difficult to hold on to. But obviously, Bournemouth's fixtures after game week 29 is out of the way are also really good. So he might actually be a good player to hold on to if you're free hitting in game week 29 and then you're wildcarding at a much later date, because Bournemouth's fixtures do stay good for quite a while. James Maddison would be the other main target I'd have a look at in the midfield. Again, no double this week, and probably not quite as good a fixture as Jarrod Bowen has, so I'd probably put him one notch lower. But nonetheless, he's a very good attacking upside midfielder at a decent enough price. I think he's 7.9 million at the moment, and we know how good Spurs have been at creating those chances. And Maddison, at the end of the day, is their chief creator. So I would hope that any of these players would pay off this week. It's just whether they actually pay off for a hit, because I've only got one free transfer. Right then, short captaincy matrix today, because I think we all know who the main captain option is going to be this week. Dominic Solanke at home to Sheffield United and Luton is too good to ignore. And as long as he's fit, which we believe he will be, that is definitely the best captaincy option this week in my books. Obviously, good underlying data, 17 attacking returns, including 14 goals, is great anyway. And even if he only had Sheffield United at home, I think he'd be in the conversation anyway. But with the double game week, I think it's just clear that he is the best option. However, that's not to say that you can't look elsewhere if you are in the chasing pack and you think there are gains to be made by going against the popular captaincy pick. Because as we know in FPL, there's never such thing as a guarantee. We're not nailing on returns for Dominic Solanke, and you can chase and try and get lucky in any given game week. If you're looking to do so, the three main options I would personally be looking at would be number one, Carlton Morris, away at Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. It is still a double game week. It's not quite as good as Bournemouth's is, but it's still two fixtures that Morris himself could easily score in. He's on penalties. The underlying data is also good. And he's actually been in a really rich vein of form recently. 7 returns in his last 7, including 5 goals in that run as well. So I think if you're looking at challenging Solanke, Morris is probably the first place I would be looking. 2 single game week players I like the look of are Saka and Watkins. Now, both are in fantastic form at the moment. And even though Saka went off at half-time against Sheffield United, he still had time for 2 returns in that time. Arsenal are battering teams at the moment. And even though Brentford will be a sterner test than Sheffield United were, I still expect Arsenal to do very well in that game. Saka's underlying data is fantastic, and the fact that he's gotten 23 attacking returns this season already goes to show that he has been consistent, and in any given single game week, he could easily get that double-digit return. So he's one option I'd look at. I'd also look at Ollie Watkins at home to Tottenham. Not an easy fixture, but the fact that Tottenham are quite leaky at the back, and Watkins is in the form of his life at the moment, means that I wouldn't pass up the opportunity to have one eye on this as a captaincy armband discussion. I do still prefer those with a double game week, but Ollie Watkins, being in the form he's in at the moment, 31 attacking returns in just 27 games so far this season. He is FPL's top point scorer at the moment as well, and Villa, again, are scoring a lot of goals and focusing very heavily on creating chances for Watkins directly as well. So again, if you wanted to be very brave and go with a single game weeker, those are probably the 2 I'd be looking at. But there's no question in my mind that Solanke will be the favourite option as long as he's fit. So let's have a look at how my team is set up for double game week 28 without the transfers loaded in. And obviously it's looking pretty problematic when you start scanning forward to game week 29 as well. I've only got 5 players that play in game week 29 as it stands, but I do have free transfers to use between now and then. So I've got 1 to use this week and 1 to use next week. And it also helps that Luton not only have a game in game week 29, but they also double this week as well. So I can use transfers that benefit me directly to get more double game weekers in for this week. That also helps me to avoid the free hit in game week 29. That being said, though, overall, I do quite like the look of my team structure as it stands. And generally speaking, if it wasn't a double game week, there's not a lot I'd want to do with it. However, because I do have the double game week to contest with, and Porro is a big injury doubt at the moment against Aston Villa. I don't think we've seen him in training so far this week either. I think transfers definitely need to be made. And the first one I would probably look at is a defensive move to get rid of Ake. Now, more on those exact moves later on, but looking at the team structure generally, only having 1 double game week, it feels a little bit light on the ground. And even though it's Solanke, I think there's more I need to do to make sure that I'm set up well for this game week, and then also next week if I'm trying to avoid that free hit. So there are 3 different transfer strategies I could have a look at, and it all depends on what I'm going to do in game week 29. So number one is using the free hit in game week 29, meaning I don't necessarily need to be bringing in players that have a game that week. Now, with that strategy, I would still actually be buying a Luton player anyway, and that would be Alfie Doughty. I think regardless of chip strategy, he is still a very important player for me to try and get to this game week. Now, I did mention previously that Ake would probably be the transfer out in most scenarios. However, in this scenario, I think keeping Ake in, but after game week 30 is out the way, because game week 29, obviously he blanks in, game week 28 and 30, respectively, are not good fixtures for defensive returns for Man City. But after that, the fixtures are looking pretty decent. So getting rid of him, if I'm not wildcarding for a while now, might be a little bit foolish. And taking out Charlie Taylor, who I don't need to rely on for game week 29 because I'm not using transfers to get there anymore. I'm free hitting that week. And bringing in Alfie Doughty, who is good for this week, is probably a much better move. The other move would be to cover off the Bournemouth defence slightly. I don't like any of the defenders that much, but I do quite like the look of Neto. Now, obviously, save points are on the menu. There's a decent chance of a clean sheet in at least one of the games. And if he can get that one clean sheet, I think it pays off the hit pretty well. My starting keeper at the moment would be Leno, and I think it's fairly likely that bringing in Neto and starting him ahead of Leno is going to pay off this game week. But then also, he's a good keeper to have from game week 30 onwards, because as discussed, they have a decent run of fixtures, and then they might even have a double in game week 34 as well. So it's not just a this week transfer, it's also a transfer to set me up well for the long term. So the next strategy would be to avoid the free hit in game week 29 and wildcard straight out of it in game week 30. Now, that would be because my team would probably look like a little bit of a mess, but also because we'll hopefully have a lot more information in game week 30 as to what the doubles for the rest of the season look like. I'd also then have my free hit in my back pocket ready to use in either game week 34 or 37. Now, looking at the transfers in particular, taking out two Man City assets on the face of things doesn't look like a wise move, but I think if I'm wildcarding in game week 30, the only two game weeks I'm worried about are this week in game week 28 and game week 29. Now, obviously, Man City, as you can see on screen, don't even play in game week 29. So that immediately is 0 points for both of them. In game week 28, Liverpool away from home is not an easy fixture. And I think if we're looking at each asset independently, Ake has a very low chance of a clean sheet away from home at Anfield against Liverpool. That's a very tough fixture for any team, and even though Man City probably have the best chance of any Premier League team of keeping a clean sheet at Anfield, the chances in my books are still pretty low. And when you look at the fact that Doughty plays 3 times in that span of time, in that double game week and then in game week 29, I think even if it was for a hit, that probably pays off. So I'm happy enough to make that move. And then the question becomes, do I still want to get rid of Phil Foden and bring in Jarrod Bowen? Now, I think it's more debatable whether or not this move pays off, because number one, if it's for a hit, then I'm really hoping that Foden doesn't go crazy against Liverpool. Now, obviously, it's a tough fixture as discussed, but I do expect some goals in that game, and Foden is on the run of form of his life at the moment. But then also, Jarrod Bowen only plays twice over the next 2 game weeks instead of 3, like the Luton or the Bournemouth assets. With that in mind, though, I still actually prefer Bowen over any of the double game weekers this week. I think he's got higher attacking upside and more chance of actually providing me with returns over the next 2 game weeks than any of the Bournemouth, who wouldn't really be an option in this strategy anyway, because I'm looking to avoid the free hit in game week 29 and they don't play that week. Or the Luton assets, Barkley, Chong, they're not really doing it for me. Their attacking upside isn't that great. And whilst they could snatch a goal or get an assist, I actually think Bowen at home to Burnley is a decent enough way of attacking the next 2 fixtures. Now, again, whether or not this pays off for a -4 is up for debate, but I think if I'm trying to avoid the free hit in game week 29, it's a risk I would be willing to take to chase the upside of Jarrod Bowen, hope that he continues his decent run of form recently, and against 2 defences I expect West Ham to be able to do quite well against, hopefully this move pays off, and I'm just hoping and crossing my fingers that Man City and Foden in particular doesn't go crazy in game week 28 against Liverpool. So the final transfer strategy I'm having a look at, and definitely considering ahead of game week 28, is a much more aggressive -8. And again, that would help set me up, not just for this week, but also game week 29, without needing to use the free hit. Now, a lot about this is similar to the previous strategy, so the -4 to get rid of Ake and then a midfielder to bring in Bowen and Doughty. So I don't think we need to talk about that too much. Although it is worth noting in this scenario, I wouldn't be getting rid of Foden. I'd be getting rid of Garnacho instead. The only reason for that would be because I've got more value tied up in Foden. So to get rid of him would be to lose some of that selling value. And Garnacho is accessible to me to get rid of this week because I'd be getting rid of Erling Haaland. So that's the main headline here. The -4 is already accounted for anyway in the other two transfers. And then the additional -4 would be to get rid of Haaland for Morris. So the decision here is whether or not Morris pays for a -4 ahead of Haaland. Now, I wouldn't be captaining either this game week anyway, so it isn't really to do with captaincy. It isn't whether or not Morris pays off with the armband on. It's just a straight decision if I believe Morris outscores Haaland over the next 2 game weeks by 4 points or not. Haaland obviously only having one fixture doesn't help his chances, but at the end of the day, it is still Erling Haaland. His underlying data is fantastic, and even against Liverpool, you'd still suggest that he's going to get chances to score. So this could blow up in my face or in anyone's face if they got rid of Haaland this week. But if you're ever going to get rid of Erling Haaland, away at Liverpool, followed by a blank game week where he obviously can't score any points anyway, might be the time that you could consider doing it. I think if it was for free, there's not too many questions in my mind that Morris is quite likely to outscore him. With three fixtures, he's on penalties, the data's not bad, and none of those 3 fixtures are too scary either. They're all good fixtures on paper. And Luton are scoring a fair few goals at the moment as well. I think for the hit, though, it becomes a little bit closer, and really for me, it is a bit of a coin flip which one comes out on top over the next 2 game weeks, even though Haaland only has 1 game versus the 3 for Morris. However, with that being said, I am chasing a little bit. I'm at 200k. I would like to get within the top 100k as soon as possible. And I think at times this season, I'm going to have to start to be more aggressive with my moves and take a chance that others might not be willing to do, because the template is pretty strong at the moment. And if I'm going to catch them, I might need to make 1 or 2 moves in the next few game weeks to try and differentiate myself from the pack and try and gain an advantage. I think this is one of those moves that could do that, although considering it's Erling Haaland and it is for a hit, it does make me quite nervous. So this one will go down to the wire, and obviously it depends whether or not I want to lock in to a strategy to avoid the free hit in game week 29 or not. So here would be my team if I made those moves, and I'm going to pretend I'm going to be brave and put in the -8 and lock that in. So looking at the team, it actually looks really good now for game week 28, and it's got 3 doublers. I would also suggest it's the best 3 doublers in my mind anyway. Solanke, Morris and Doughty. I'm very happy with that. It gives me 3 extra players for game week 29 as well. I'd now be up to 8 players who play in game week 29, and I could get to 10 for a hit with the transfers I make in game week 29 as well, including probably all of the key people as well. I'd have Son, I'd have Watkins, Morris as well, Bowen. I'm very happy with all of them. And then I'll probably be looking at bringing in Ivan Toney and a midfielder as well next week. So even though it is for a -8, I think over the next 2 game weeks, it could pay off. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the way this team is set up for game week 28. However, again, that -8 is going to hinder me this week. And I think on average, I'm going to be down this week alone in isolation. However, at some point this season, I'm going to have to go on the defensive, take a few hits, and try and maintain my rank for a bit. And then at a later point, I'm going to be able to chase that rank because I've got the free hit, I've got transfers to use, I've wildcarded into a team I really like the look of. So hopefully I won't need to take as many hits to set my team up for the upcoming doubles after game week 30 and after that wildcard. For the moment, I think I'm slightly favouring this strategy. But as I said at the start of the video, any injuries whatsoever to the players that I've got in situ already for game week 29, and that does include Porro, by the way, as well, who is still a doubt. We still haven't seen him training. if any of those players are not fit by game week 29, then it just takes me one player away and it's another -4 to get to a team I like the look of. And all of a sudden, a free hit in game week 29 looks all the more appealing. So I think it does go down to the wire for me, and a lot will depend on news we get on injuries over the next 48 hours. And then also, even if I do make these moves, I could still get injuries between game week 28 and game week 29, which could scupper my plans to go really aggressive and avoid the free hit in game week 29. In the meantime, though, on the face of things, I quite like the look of this setup, and I'm happy with the logic, the process I'm using for the transfers here and over the next 2 game weeks. Do let me know if you've got any of your own questions ahead of the double game week 28 deadline. I'll be happy to answer them in the comments below before we lock our teams in for the game week 28 deadline. And of course, if you've enjoyed the video, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel as I try and chase down 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season.